The screams weren't from childbirth. Seraphina's voice cracked against the winter silence as the silver-tipped whip carved another line across her bare shoulders. The snow beneath her turned crimson, steam rising where her blood met the frozen ground. Her wrists burned against the rough rope that bound her to the ancient oak, its bark as unforgiving as the faces surrounding her. 3 daughters. Marcus Ravenclaw's voice dripped with disgust as he coiled the whip for another strike. Not even one son to redeem your worthless bloodline. The 3 tiny bundles in the snow beside her tree mewled weakly, their cries growing fainter in the brutal cold. Seraphina tried to turn toward them, but the ropes held her fast. Her body screamed in protest. She'd given birth less than an hour ago, and now they were destroying what little strength remained. "Please," she gasped, her breath forming white clouds in the air. "They're just babies. They need—" The whip silenced her, opening a fresh wound along her ribs. The pack members watching from the circle stepped back as blood sprayed across the pristine snow. Some looked away. Others watched with hungry eyes, feeding on her pain. "What they need," Marcus snarled, "is to learn early what happens to weaklings in this pack. What happens to women who can't fulfill their most basic purpose." Seraphina had known this moment would come. She'd felt it in the disgusted glances when her belly grew round, in the whispered conversations that died when she walked past. The Ravenclaw pack had one rule above all others: strength. And in their world, strength meant sons. Warriors. Future alphas to expand their territory and their power. Daughters were disappointments. 3 daughters were an unforgivable shame. 20 more lashes, Marcus declared, his pale eyes gleaming. "Then we'll see if the Alpha King wants to waste resources keeping them alive through winter." The gathered wolves murmured their agreement. Seraphina closed her eyes, trying to find some inner reserve of strength. She had to survive this. Her daughters needed her to survive this. But as Marcus raised the whip again, a new scent cut through the metallic tang of blood and the sharp bite of winter air. Pine and leather, wild and untamed, with an underlying current of raw power that made every wolf in the clearing freeze. The Alpha King had arrived. Demon Blackthorn stepped into the circle like a shadow made flesh. 6.5 feet of lethal grace, with midnight black hair that fell just past his shoulders and silver eyes that missed nothing. The massive wolves flanking him were nearly as large as horses, their golden eyes scanning the crowd for threats. But Demon had stopped moving entirely. His nostrils flared as he breathed in deeply, his head turning slowly until those mercury eyes locked on Seraphina. The scent hit him like a physical blow. Honeysuckle and summer rain, underneath the copper smell of blood. Sweet and wild and absolutely intoxicating. "Mate!" The word echoed in his mind with the force of an avalanche. After 35 years of ruling the supernatural world's most powerful werewolf kingdom, after decades of assuming he'd never find his destined partner, she was here. Bleeding in the snow, her auburn hair matted with ice, her green eyes wide with pain and defiance. And she belonged to his beta. "Your Majesty," Marcus bowed, though his grip on the whip never loosened. "Perfect timing. I was just administering justice for this one's failure. 3 daughters, as I'm sure you can smell. Clearly, the bloodline is too weak to continue." Demon's jaw clenched as he took in the scene. The bound woman, the crying infants, the blood-soaked snow. His mate being tortured because she'd given birth to daughters instead of sons. The bitter irony wasn't lost on him. His own mother had been banished from her birth pack for the same crime. "Release her," he said quietly. Marcus's eyebrows shot up. "Your Majesty? You heard me." Demon's voice carried the unmistakable edge of command. "Cut her down. Now." The beta's face flushed red. "But the law clearly states." "I know what the law states." Demon stepped closer, and Marcus unconsciously took a step back. "I also know that those children carry Ravenclaw blood, regardless of their gender. You would waste valuable pack members over primitive superstition. It wasn't the real reason, of course. Demon would have burned down the entire forest to protect his mate, law or no law. But he couldn't reveal the mate bond, not here, not like this. Marcus's claim on her was publicly recognized, and challenging it directly would mean a formal duel to the death. And while Demon had no doubt he could destroy Marcus in single combat, the political ramifications would be devastating. The other packs would see it as the Alpha King stealing a beta's woman by force, undermining the very structure of their society. "Of course, Your Majesty," Marcus said through gritted teeth. He jerked his head at 2 of his enforcers. "Cut her down." The ropes fell away, and Seraphina collapsed into the bloody snow. Her body shook violently, from cold, pain, and exhaustion. She tried to crawl toward her daughters, but her arms gave out. Demon moved without thinking, dropping to one knee beside her. The mate bond sang between them as he lifted her gently, his hands impossibly gentle for someone so large and dangerous. Her scent wrapped around him, even stronger now, making his wolf pace restlessly under his skin. "The children," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I have them," one of his guards said, carefully gathering the 3 tiny bundles. Seraphina's eyes fluttered shut as Demon lifted her against his chest. She was so small, so fragile, and the protective instincts roaring through him were almost overwhelming. His mate, hurt, bleeding, claimed by another man but undeniably his. "She needs medical attention," he said curtly. "And the children need warmth and feeding." Marcus's face had gone from red to white. "Your Majesty, with respect, they are my responsibility. My property. I'll tend to them as I see fit." The word property made Demon's vision go red around the edges. His wolf snarled, demanding blood, demanding justice for what had been done to their mate. But he forced himself to remain calm. "Property that's of no use if it dies," he said coldly. "You've made your point about discipline. Now prove you're capable of protecting what's yours." It was a careful political maneuver, wrapped in language that saved face for both of them. Marcus could accept medical care for his property without looking weak, and Demon could ensure his mate's survival without revealing the true reason for his interference. But as he carried Seraphina toward the castle, her unconscious form cradled against him, Demon's mind was already working. The mate bond changed everything. She might be claimed by Marcus now, but bonds like theirs transcended pack law, transcended politics, transcended everything. He just had to figure out how to claim her without starting a war. Behind him, Marcus watched with narrowed eyes as his woman disappeared into the Alpha King's protection. The scent of possession still clung to Demon, faint but unmistakable to someone who knew how to look. The beta's hand clenched around his whip handle until his knuckles went white. He'd waited too long to claim Seraphina properly, too confident in his control over her. And now the most powerful werewolf in the kingdom had scented what Marcus had been too arrogant to recognize. His mate bond with her might be weak, forced through dominance rather than destiny, but it was legally binding. The Alpha King could posture all he wanted. Seraphina belonged to Marcus Ravenclaw, and he'd kill anyone who tried to take her away. Even kings could bleed. Chapter 2. The castle's infirmary smelled of herbs and antiseptic, a sharp contrast to the metallic scent of blood that still clung to Demon's clothes. He stood at the foot of the bed where Seraphina lay unconscious, her pale skin a canvas of angry red welts and deep cuts. The pack's healer, an elderly woman named Morrigan, worked silently over her patient, cleaning wounds and applying salves with practiced efficiency. "She'll live," Morrigan said without looking up. "But she's lost a lot of blood, and her body is still recovering from childbirth. She needs rest, proper nutrition, and time to heal." Demon nodded curtly, though his eyes never left Seraphina's face. Even battered and unconscious, she was beautiful. Her auburn hair spread across the white pillow like liquid fire, and her lips, though pale now, were full and soft. The mate bond hummed between them, growing stronger with every breath she took. "The children," he asked. "Alive, but barely. They need their mother's milk, and she's in no condition to provide it yet. I've found a wet nurse among the Omega females, but—" Morrigan's weathered hands paused in their work. "Your Majesty, forgive my boldness, but why are you concerning yourself with Beta Marcus's family? This isn't your responsibility." "Because she's mine," his wolf snarled in his mind. "Because every instinct I have demands I protect her and her young. Because the sight of her blood on that snow made me want to tear Marcus Ravenclaw apart with my bare hands." "The children are pack members," he said instead, his voice carefully neutral. "All pack members deserve protection." Morrigan gave him a look that suggested she wasn't buying his diplomatic answer, but she was too wise to press further. "Of course, Your Majesty. I'll see that they're cared for." The door to the infirmary burst open without warning, and Marcus Ravenclaw strode in, his pale eyes blazing with fury. Behind him came 2 of his enforcers and, more troubling, the pack's legal advocate, a thin, nervous man named Cornelius who carried a leather satchel. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "I demand the return of my property." Demon's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Your property is receiving necessary medical care." "I told you." "No." Marcus stepped closer, and Demon caught the scent of possessive rage rolling off him in waves. "This has gone far enough. I know what I smelled in that clearing. I know why you're really here." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Morrigan quietly gathered her supplies and moved toward the door, recognizing the signs of an alpha confrontation. But Demon's voice stopped her. "Stay," he commanded, his silver eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "Continue your work." "You can't have her," Marcus snarled, his wolf pressing close to the surface. "I don't care if you're the Alpha King. She belongs to me." "Lower your voice." Demon's words carried the weight of absolute authority. "You're in my castle, speaking to your king. Show proper respect or be removed." Marcus's jaw worked furiously, but he took a step back and lowered his head in a mockery of submission. "Forgive me, your majesty. But surely you understand my position. Seraphina is my mate, bonded to me by law and custom. No one has the right to interfere." Demon's wolf paced restlessly, wanting to challenge that claim with violence. But Marcus was right about pack law. A bonded pair couldn't be separated except by death or formal dissolution, which required the consent of both parties. And unconscious women couldn't give consent. "Show me," he said quietly. Marcus gestured to Cornelius, who stepped forward nervously and began pulling documents from his satchel. "The bonding certificate, your majesty, signed by Beta Marcus and witnessed by 3 pack members. The ceremony took place 6 months ago." Demon took the parchment and scanned its contents, his expression growing darker with every word. It was legitimate. Marcus had claimed Seraphina according to pack law, with all the proper witnesses and ceremonies. But there was something off about the document, something that made his instincts prickle. "She was barely 18 when this was signed," he observed coldly. "Perfectly legal," Marcus said with a smug smile. "Old enough to be bonded, old enough to bear children." Her father agreed to the arrangement. Of course he had. Demon knew Seraphina's father, a weak man drowning in gambling debts who would have sold his daughter to anyone offering enough coin. The arrangement probably saved the family from ruin, at the cost of an innocent girl's freedom. "However," Cornelius continued, pulling out another document, "there's also this." This second parchment made Demon's blood run cold. It was a property transfer, written in the old language and sealed with both Marcus's mark and Seraphina's father's signature. The legal terminology was complex, but the meaning was clear. Seraphina hadn't just been bonded to Marcus as his mate. She'd been sold to him as his property, to own and dispose of as he saw fit until death. Such contracts were ancient, rarely used, and completely legal under pack law. "She can never leave me," Marcus said, his voice full of vicious satisfaction. "Not through divorce, not through rejection, not through any legal means. She belongs to me body and soul until one of us dies." The mate bond roared in Demon's chest, demanding action, demanding blood. His wolf wanted to rip Marcus's throat out and claim Seraphina right here, right now. But doing so would make him no better than the Beta, taking a woman by force, regardless of law or her own wishes. A soft moan from the bed drew all their attention. Seraphina's green eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glazed with pain. She tried to sit up, but Morrigan gently pushed her back down. "Easy, child," the healer murmured. "You're safe now." "My daughters," Seraphina whispered, her voice hoarse. "Where are my daughters?" "They're being cared for," Demon said, moving closer to the bed. The scent of her, even overlaid with herbs and medicine, made his pulse race. "They're alive and safe." Her eyes found his, and for a moment something passed between them, recognition, perhaps, or simply gratitude. But then her gaze shifted to Marcus, and her entire body went rigid with fear and fury. "Get away from me," she snarled, trying to push herself up again despite her injuries. "Don't touch me. Don't you dare touch me." Marcus's face darkened. "You'll show respect to your mate, Seraphina. You've caused enough trouble for one day." "Mate!" She laughed bitterly, the sound raw and broken. "You mean your property. Isn't that what I am? What your precious contract says I am?" "You know the terms," Marcus said coldly. "Your father explained them clearly when he signed the papers. You accepted them." "I was 18 and terrified." The words came out as a scream that seemed to echo off the infirmary walls. "My family was starving, and you offered food and shelter in exchange for my life. That's not acceptance, that's coercion." She tried to swing her legs over the side of the bed, clearly intending to flee, but the moment her feet touched the floor, her knees buckled. Demon moved without thinking, catching her before she could fall, and the contact sent electricity shooting through both of them. The mate bond snapped taut between them, so powerful that even Marcus took a step back. Seraphina's eyes went wide with shock and something else, recognition of what Demon was to her. Her true mate, not the man who'd bought her like livestock. "You," she breathed, her fingers clutching at his shirt. "You're nothing," Marcus snarled, moving forward aggressively. He's nothing to you. I'm your mate. I'm the one who claimed you, bonded you, owns you. Seraphina's expression shifted from wonder to pure rage. With strength born of desperation, she pulled away from Demon and spat directly in Marcus's face, her saliva pink with blood from her split lip. I belong to no one, she hissed. Not to you, not to him, not to anyone. I'd rather die in the snow with my daughters than spend another day as your prisoner. She tried to push past them both, heading for the door with unsteady steps. But the blood loss and trauma were too much. She made it 3 steps before collapsing, her body crumpling to the cold stone floor like a broken bird. Demon was beside her in an instant, gathering her unconscious form into his arms. The protective instincts roaring through him were almost overwhelming. She was his mate, his to protect, and she was hurt and vulnerable and in danger. Enough, he said, his voice carrying the absolute authority of an alpha king. This ends now. Marcus stepped forward, his hand outstretched. Give her to me. She's mine by right and law. No. The word came out as a growl that made everyone in the room take a step back. She's made her feelings clear. She rejects you both. It doesn't matter what she wants. Marcus's composure finally cracked completely. The contract is binding. She can't reject what she doesn't have the legal right to refuse. Demon looked down at Seraphina's pale face, at the woman who was meant to be his but belonged to another through law and circumstance. His heart was breaking, but his mind was working furiously, searching for a solution that would protect her without destroying everything he'd built. And then it came to him. A loophole, dangerous and unprecedented but legally sound. You're right, he said quietly, and Marcus's face lit up with triumph. The contract is binding. She belongs to you until death. Exactly. So hand her over, Anne. However, Demon continued, his silver eyes growing cold as winter. The contract states that she belongs to you. It says nothing about her children. Marcus's eyes narrowed. The children belong to the father. That's pack law. But these children were born out of wedlock, Demon pointed out with deadly calm. Seraphina was bonded to you as your mate, but the bonding ceremony was 6 months ago. These children are barely hours old. By pack law, children born to an unbonded female belong to her bloodline, not her mates. Cornelius's face went white as he realized where the Alpha King was heading. Your Majesty, surely you don't mean. I hereby declare these 3 children wards of the crown, Demon announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute law. As wards, they require protection and care. Since they're too young to be separated from their mother, I'm taking Seraphina Ravenclaw into protective custody as well. You can't do that, Marcus roared. She's mine. She is, Demon agreed with a cold smile. But her children aren't. And since separating a nursing mother from her infants would be cruel and potentially fatal to all parties involved, I'm afraid I have no choice but to keep them together. It was a brilliant legal maneuver, and everyone in the room knew it. Demon couldn't claim Seraphina as his mate, couldn't break the property contract that bound her to Marcus, but he could protect her children and use that protection to shield her as well. For how long? Marcus demanded. Until the children are old enough to be independent. Say 18 years. The beta's face turned purple with rage. This is theft. This is the law, Demon said firmly. Challenge it if you can. But until then, Seraphina and her daughters will remain under my protection as prisoners of the crown. They'll be housed in the castle under guard with all their needs provided for. He looked down at the unconscious woman in his arms, her face peaceful despite everything she'd endured. She'd rejected them both, chosen independence over any kind of bondage, and he respected that even as it broke his heart. But he could protect her. He could keep her safe from Marcus's cruelty, give her children a chance at a better life, and hope that someday she might forgive him for the cage he was building around her, even if it was a golden one. Guards, he called, and 2 of his personal soldiers stepped forward. Prepare quarters in the East Wing. Our prisoners will need comfortable accommodations. Marcus watched with murder in his pale eyes as Demon carried his legal wife away. The property contract still bound her to him, still made her his until death. But the Alpha King had found a way to steal her anyway, wrapped in legal technicalities and royal decree. It wasn't over. It would never be over until one of them was dead. But for now, Seraphina was beyond his reach, protected by the very man who wanted to claim her for himself. And Marcus would spend every day planning how to get her back and make them both pay for this humiliation. The game had only just begun. Chapter 3. The East Wing of Castle Blackthorn had been built for royalty, but it felt like the most beautiful prison in the world. Serafina stood at the tall windows of her chambers, watching the sun set over the snow-covered mountains beyond. 3 weeks had passed since Demon's decree had made her his prisoner, and every day the golden bars of her cage seemed to close in a little tighter. The rooms were opulent, silk curtains, Persian rugs, a fireplace that never went cold, and furniture that probably cost more than her father's entire estate. But luxury couldn't disguise captivity. Behind her, the 3 bassinets held her sleeping daughters. Little Arya, the eldest by mere minutes, with her shock of dark hair. Lyra, the middle child, whose green eyes already showed hints of her mother's fire. And tiny Luna, the smallest and most fragile, who still struggled to nurse properly. They were the only lights in Serafina's increasingly dark world. "You haven't touched your dinner again." The deep voice from the doorway made her spine stiffen, though she didn't turn around. Every night for 3 weeks, Demon Blackthorn had appeared at her door like clockwork. Always after sunset, always carrying a tray of food she barely ate, always maintaining that careful, maddening distance between them. "I'm not hungry," she said, her reflection ghost-like in the darkening glass. She heard him set the tray on the small dining table, the careful clink of china and silver. Her treacherous senses catalogued every sound he made, every breath he took. The mate bond between them had grown stronger with each passing day, until she could feel his presence like a second heartbeat in her chest. It was torture of the cruelest kind. "You've lost weight," he observed, and she could hear the frown in his voice. "Morrigan says you're not producing enough milk for the children." Now she did turn, her green eyes flashing. "Whose fault is that? You keep me locked in these rooms like a caged bird, then wonder why I'm wasting away." Demon stood silhouetted in the doorway, tall and powerful and heartbreakingly handsome. He'd removed his formal jacket, leaving him in just a white shirt that clung to his broad shoulders and dark trousers that emphasized the lean strength of his body. His silver eyes caught the firelight, making them seem to glow with their own inner fire. The mate bond sang between them, a constant hum of attraction and recognition that made her skin feel too tight. She wanted to run to him, to let him wrap those strong arms around her and promise that everything would be all right. She wanted to press her face into the hollow of his throat and breathe in that intoxicating scent of pine and leather and wild masculine heat. Instead, she wrapped her arms around herself and stayed by the window. "You're not a prisoner," he said quietly. "You're under protection." "From what?" "The only person who's hurt me lately is you." The words came out sharper than she'd intended, and she saw him flinch. "Do you have any idea what it's like? Feeling this thing between us, knowing you want me as much as I want you, and having to pretend it doesn't exist." His jaw clenched. "Serafina. Don't." She held up a hand to stop him. "Don't say my name like that. Like you're in pain. Because you're not the one trapped here with nowhere to go and no choices left. You think I have choices?" His voice was raw with frustration. "You think this is easy for me? Watching you fade away, knowing I could make you happy, but being bound by laws I can't break without destroying everything I've built." She laughed bitterly. "Poor Alpha King. Such a heavy burden, ruling the world while keeping your conscience clean." He was across the room in 3 strides, his hands gripping her shoulders with barely restrained force. This close, the mate bond was overwhelming, making her pulse race and her skin burn where he touched her. "You want to know what my burden is?" His silver eyes blazed with barely controlled hunger. "It's lying awake every night knowing you're in pain and not being able to comfort you. It's watching you grow thinner and sadder every day and knowing I'm the cause. It's wanting to claim you so desperately that I've considered declaring war on my own beta just to have the right to hold you." His thumbs stroked across her shoulders, the gentle touch at odds with the fierce intensity in his voice. "My burden is being your mate and having to pretend I'm not. It's loving you and having to call you my prisoner to keep you safe." The word love hung between them like a physical thing. Serafina's breath caught, her eyes searching his face for any sign that he didn't mean it. But there was nothing but raw honesty in his expression, and the mate bond between them pulsed with the truth of his feelings. "Demon," she whispered, her hands coming up to rest against his chest. She could feel his heart racing beneath her palms, matching the frantic rhythm of her own. For a moment, the world narrowed down to just the two of them. His head bent toward hers, her lips parted in invitation, and the mate bond sang with joy at their closeness. She could smell his desire, feel the tremor in his hands where they held her, and knew that one kiss would ignite a fire that would consume them both. A thin wail from one of the bassinets shattered the moment. They sprang apart as if burned, both breathing hard. Demon ran a hand through his dark hair, his expression tortured, while Serafina hurried to tend to Luna, who had woken hungry and fretful. "I should go," Demon said, his voice hoarse. "Yes," Serafina agreed, though every fiber of her being screamed in protest. "You should." But he didn't move. He stood there watching her lift Luna from the bassinet, his eyes following every gentle movement as she settled into the rocking chair by the fire to nurse her daughter. The domestic scene seemed to fascinate him, as if he'd never seen a mother caring for her child before. Maybe he hadn't. Alpha Kings didn't typically concern themselves with such mundane things. "She's getting stronger," he observed quietly. Serafina looked down at Luna's tiny face, already more alert and focused than she'd been the week before. "All of them are. They're fighters. Like their mother." The compliment was spoken so softly she almost missed it. When she looked up, she found Demon watching her with such tenderness that her heart clenched. This was the man she was meant to be with, the father her daughters should have known, the love she would never be allowed to claim. "Why do you do this to yourself?" she asked suddenly. "Coming here every night, bringing me food, watching me with my children. You're torturing us both." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Because I can't stay away. I've tried. God knows I've tried. But you're like gravity. I'm caught in your orbit and I can't break free." "Then don't." The words slipped out before she could stop them. "Break the laws. Challenge the contract. Fight for what you want." His laugh was bitter. "And lose everything? My kingdom, my people's respect, my ability to protect anyone? Marcus is already spreading rumors about my unhealthy obsession with you. Half the pack leaders think I've gone soft, that I'm unfit to rule because I won't simply take what I want by force." Serafina's blood chilled. "What kind of rumors?" "That I'm weak. That my fixation on another man's mate has compromised my judgment. That perhaps it's time for a stronger leader." His silver eyes met hers, heavy with the weight of responsibility. 3 of the northern packs have already sent ambassadors, ostensibly to discuss concerns about my recent decisions. The implications were clear. A challenge to Demon's rule would mean civil war, with hundreds of thousands of werewolves caught in the crossfire. And it would all be because of her. "Then let me go," she said quietly. "Release me from protection. Let me take my daughters somewhere far away where we can't cause you any more trouble." "No." The word came out as a growl that made Luna fuss in her arms. "I won't let Marcus have you back. I won't let him hurt you again. So I'm trapped forever? Your prisoner in all but name, watching you sacrifice your kingdom for a woman you can never have." He moved to the window, his hands braced against the frame as he stared out at the darkness beyond. The tension in his broad shoulders spoke of a man at war with himself, caught between duty and desire with no clear path forward. "There has to be another way," he said finally. "Some legal precedent, some loophole we haven't considered." "You've had your best legal minds working on this for weeks," Serafina pointed out. "If there was another way, they would have found it." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths and impossible longings. Luna had finished nursing and dozed off in Serafina's arms, a tiny picture of contentment that stood in stark contrast to the turmoil surrounding her. "I should put her down," Serafina murmured, rising from the rocking chair. As she bent over the bassinet to settle Luna among her soft blankets, she felt Demon move behind her. His presence was a warm wall at her back, close enough that she could feel his breath stir the hair at her nape. "She has your eyes," he said softly. Serafina's hands stilled on the blankets. "They all do. Good. They should look like you, not him." The possessiveness in his voice sent shivers down her spine. When she straightened and turned, she found herself trapped between his body and the bassinet, close enough to see the gold flecks in his silver eyes. "Demon," she breathed, her hands coming up instinctively to rest against his chest. "I know." His forehead dropped to rest against hers, their breath mingling in the small space between them. "I know this is impossible. I know I'm being selfish. But God help me, Serafina, I'm drowning in you." Her eyes fluttered closed as his hands came up to frame her face, his thumbs tracing the delicate line of her cheekbones. The mate bond between them pulsed with desperate need, and she could feel his control hanging by a thread. "If things were different," she whispered. "If I was free." "Don't." His voice was rough with pain. "Don't torture us both with what-ifs." But she couldn't stop herself. "I would choose you. Over anyone, over anything. I would choose you." The words broke something in him. His control shattered, and suddenly his mouth was on hers, desperate and hungry and heartbreakingly tender. She melted into him, her arms wrapping around his neck as she kissed him back with 3 weeks' worth of suppressed longing. The mate bond sang between them, finally given the recognition it craved. This was right, this was perfect, this was what they were meant to be. His hands tangled in her hair, her body pressed against his solid warmth, and for just a moment the rest of the world disappeared. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Demon rested his forehead against hers again, his eyes closed as if he could memorize the moment. "This can't happen again," he said, though his hands were still gentle on her face. "I know. I won't be able to stop next time. I know." He pulled away slowly, each inch of distance obviously costing him. By the time he reached the door, his expression had shuddered back into its usual careful mask, but she could see the storm raging beneath the surface. "Eat your dinner," he said quietly. "The children need you strong." Then he was gone, leaving her alone with the echo of their first and last kiss burning on her lips. Serafina sank back into the rocking chair, her legs too shaky to support her. She touched her mouth where she could still feel the pressure of his lips, still taste the wild, masculine flavor that was uniquely his. The mate bond hummed with satisfaction, finally given a glimpse of what it craved most. But even as her body sang with the memory of his touch, her mind was clear about one thing. This couldn't continue. The political situation was growing more dangerous by the day, and her presence was undermining Demon's ability to rule. Soon he would have to choose between keeping her and keeping his kingdom. She already knew which choice he would make, which choice he had to make. And when that day came, she would have to find the strength to let him go, even if it destroyed them both. Outside her window, snow began to fall again, covering the world in pristine white. But all Serafina could think about was how quickly snow could be stained red, and how much blood might be spilled before this impossible situation reached its inevitable end. Chapter 4. The full moon hung like a silver coin against the velvet sky, casting the forest clearing in ethereal light. The hunting moon ceremony was the most sacred event in the werewolf calendar, a night when the entire pack gathered to honor their wolf nature and renew their bonds of loyalty and strength. Serafina had never attended before. As an unbonded female from a disgraced family, she'd always been deemed unworthy of participating in such an important ritual. But tonight, dressed in a flowing crimson gown that made her look like a bleeding rose against the snow, she stood beside Marcus Ravenclaw as his claimed mate, a living trophy to be displayed before the assembled pack. The gown had been his choice, of course. Everything about her appearance tonight had been carefully orchestrated by Marcus to send a message. She belonged to him, marked and claimed for all to see. The deep crimson silk clung to her still too thin frame, the neckline cut low enough to display the silver collar around her throat. Another of Marcus's additions, inscribed with his name and pack symbol. She felt like a dressed-up corpse. "Remember," Marcus murmured in her ear, his breath hot and unwelcome against her skin. "You represent my honor tonight. Smile, stand straight, and don't embarrass me in front of the other alphas." Serafina kept her expression carefully neutral, though her hands trembled slightly where they rested at her sides. She'd left her daughters back at the castle with Morrigan, their healthy cries echoing in her memory like a lifeline. They were the only reason she was enduring this humiliation. Demon had made it clear that her compliance with Marcus's public displays was the price of her daughter's safety. The clearing buzzed with activity as pack members gathered around the ceremonial bonfire. Alphas from neighboring territories had come to pay their respects, their own mates beside them in elegant finery. But Serafina could feel their eyes on her, could hear the whispers that followed in her wake. "That's her, the breeder who caught the Alpha King's attention. 3 daughters and not 1 son. Shameful. Look how thin she's gotten. Doesn't look like much now. Marcus should have put her aside after such a disappointing birth." Each comment was a small wound, but Serafina had grown skilled at ignoring the pack's cruelty. What was harder to ignore was the burning gaze she could feel from across the clearing, where Demon stood with his inner circle of advisors. She hadn't seen him since their kiss 3 nights ago. He'd stopped his nightly visits abruptly, leaving her to wonder if she'd imagined the passion in his eyes, the desperate hunger in his touch. But when she finally allowed herself to glance in his direction, she found him watching her with an expression of barely controlled fury. He looked magnificent in his ceremonial robes, midnight blue silk embroidered with silver thread, the Alpha King's crown resting on his dark hair like it had been made for him. But it was the rage radiating from him that truly commanded attention. His silver eyes tracked every movement Marcus made, every possessive touch he placed on Serafina's arm, and she could see his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "The king doesn't look pleased," one of the visiting alphas observed to Marcus, loud enough for Seraphina to overhear. Marcus's grip on her arm tightened painfully. "His Majesty will have to learn to accept that some things are beyond even his reach," he replied with false confidence. "My mate's protection was a temporary arrangement. Tonight, she returns to her proper place." It was a lie and everyone knew it. The legal decree protecting her daughters was still in effect, and would be for years to come. But Marcus was playing to his audience, trying to project strength and ownership in front of the other pack leaders. The ceremony began with the traditional blessing, spoken by the pack's eldest alpha in the ancient language. Seraphina tried to focus on the familiar words, on the comfort of ritual and tradition, but her attention kept drifting to Demon. Every time their eyes met across the clearing, the mate bond flared to life, making her skin burn and her heart race. She was so distracted by the pull between them that she almost missed the first sign of danger. A branch snapped in the forest beyond the clearing. Too sharp, too sudden to be natural. Seraphina's head turned toward the sound, her wolf senses picking up something that made her pulse spike with alarm. The scent hit her a second later, wild feral, tinged with madness and bloodlust. Rogues. A large pack of them, moving through the trees toward the ceremony. She opened her mouth to shout a warning, but Marcus's hand clamped over her lips before she could make a sound. "Not a word," he hissed in her ear, his grip bruising. "You'll ruin everything." Horror washed over her as understanding dawned. Marcus knew about the attack. Had planned it even. She could see it in his pale eyes, in the way he positioned himself between her and the pack's warriors, in the satisfied smirk that played at the corners of his mouth. He wanted the rogues to attack. Wanted chaos and bloodshed, and the first rogue burst from the tree line with a howl that froze the blood in her veins. Pandemonium erupted. The ceremonial gathering dissolved into screaming chaos as 24 rogues poured into the clearing, their eyes wild with hunger and their teeth stained with old blood. These weren't desperate outcasts driven by starvation. They moved with military precision, targeting the pack's leaders and strongest warriors first. Seraphina found herself shoved backward as Marcus released her, his form already beginning to shift into his wolf shape. But instead of moving to protect her, he melted into the crowd of fleeing pack members, abandoning her to face the rogues alone. A massive gray wolf with foam flecking its muzzle spotted her standing frozen in her crimson dress. Its lips peeled back in a grin that was all predator, all death, and it began stalking toward her with deadly intent. Seraphina stumbled backward, her silk slippers sliding on the blood-slicked ground. She had no weapon, no way to defend herself, and the rogue was closing the distance between them with terrifying speed. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of battle, snarls and screams and the wet sound of claws meeting flesh. The rogue tensed to spring, its powerful haunches coiling like loaded springs. Seraphina threw her arms up instinctively, knowing it was futile but unable to stop herself from trying to shield her face from those terrible fangs. The attack never came. A blur of midnight black first slammed into the gray rogue with enough force to break bones. Demon, in his massive alpha form, was a creature of terrible beauty. Larger than any wolf had a right to be, his coat gleaming like liquid shadow in the moonlight. He tore the gray rogue's throat out with surgical precision, then wheeled to face the 3 others that had been closing in on Seraphina. What followed was less a fight than a massacre. Demon moved through the rogues like death incarnate, his fangs and claws dealing out justice with brutal efficiency. But even as he fought, more rogues poured into the clearing, and Seraphina could see that the pack's defenses were crumbling. A smaller rogue, scarred and vicious-looking, had circled around behind her while Demon was occupied. It lunged for her back, claws extended to rip through silk and flesh alike. Pain exploded through her shoulder as the rogue's claws found their mark, sending her sprawling face-first into the blood-soaked ground. The creature landed on top of her, its weight pinning her down while its teeth snapped inches from her throat. She could smell its rancid breath, feel its saliva dripping onto her neck, and knew she was about to die. But even as terror filled her, her only thought was for her daughters, who would care for them, who would love them the way a mother should. The rogue's weight disappeared suddenly, replaced by a spray of hot blood that painted the ground around her head. When she managed to push herself up on her elbows, she saw Demon in human form standing over the creature's corpse, his ceremonial robes torn and stained, but his silver eyes blazing with protective fury. "Seraphina!" He dropped to his knees beside her, his hands gentle as they turned her to assess her wounds. "Where are you hurt?" "My shoulder," she gasped, trying to sit up. The movement sent fire through her back, and she would have collapsed again if not for Demon's strong arms supporting her. Blood was spreading across the crimson silk of her dress, but she was alive. Demon was here, and she was alive, and that was all that mattered. "I need to get you out of here," he said, already lifting her into his arms. "The pack's healers." "No." Her voice was weak but determined. "The others. Help the others first." He looked down at her with something like wonder in his eyes. "Even now, after Marcus left you to die, you're thinking of the pack." "It's the right thing to do," she whispered, though she was finding it harder to keep her eyes open. The blood loss was making her dizzy, and Demon's warmth was so comforting that she wanted to sink into it and never surface. But around them the battle still raged. She could hear the sounds of fighting moving toward the far edge of the clearing as the pack's warriors finally began to rally. The rogues were being pushed back, but not before they'd done terrible damage. "The right thing," Demon repeated softly, "would be for your mate to have protected you instead of using you as bait." The words confirmed what she'd already suspected. He'd seen Marcus's betrayal, understood the trap that had been laid. But there was no time to discuss it now. A group of pack warriors was approaching, their faces grim as they surveyed the carnage. "Your Majesty," the lead warrior called out, "the rogues are retreating. We've taken heavy casualties, but the threat has passed." Demon nodded curtly. "Gather our wounded and dead. I want a full count within the hour." His arms tightened around Seraphina. "And find Beta Marcus. I have questions for him." The warrior's eyes flicked to Seraphina's blood-stained form, then back to his king. "Yes, Your Majesty. Should we escort you back to the castle?" "I can manage," Demon replied, though his voice carried an edge that made it clear he wasn't requesting, he was commanding. "See to the others." As the warriors dispersed to tend to their grim duties, Demon began walking toward the castle, his steps careful and measured to avoid jostling Seraphina's injuries. She could feel the eyes of the surviving pack members following them, could hear the whispers starting up again. But this time, the whispers were different. "Did you see how he fought for her? Like a man protecting his mate. Marcus ran. Left her there to die. The king saved her. Risked his own life to save her. Look how he holds her. Like she's precious." Each comment was another nail in the coffin of secrecy they'd been trying to maintain. By morning, the entire pack would know that Demon Blackthorn had fought like a man possessed to protect Marcus Ravenclaw's mate, had carried her to safety with a tenderness that spoke of deeper feelings than mere royal duty. "They're all staring," Seraphina murmured against his chest, her voice muffled by the silk of his torn robes. "Let them stare," he replied fiercely. "Let them see exactly how a real man protects what's his." The possessiveness in his voice sent shivers through her that had nothing to do with blood loss. "I'm not yours," she reminded him weakly, though the words tasted like lies on her tongue. His arms tightened around her. "Tonight you are. Tonight you're alive because I couldn't bear to lose you. And that's enough." They'd reached the castle grounds now, and Seraphina could see Morrigan hurrying toward them with her bag of healing supplies. Behind the healer came two of Demon's personal guards, their faces grim with purpose. "How is she?" Morrigan demanded, falling into step beside them. "Alive," Demon said tersely. "Claw wounds to the shoulder and back. Possible concussion. She needs immediate attention." "Take her to the infirmary," Morrigan instructed. "I'll need hot water, clean linens, and someone to fetch my strongest healing potions from the tower." But instead of heading toward the castle's medical wing, Demon turned toward the east wing, toward Seraphina's chambers. "Your Majesty," one of the guards ventured carefully, the healer said. "I heard what she said," Demon cut him off. "But Seraphina will recover in her own rooms, where she'll be comfortable and safe." And where he could protect her personally, Seraphina realized. Where he could stand guard over her recovery and make sure nothing like tonight ever happened again. As they climbed the stairs to her chambers, she felt tears beginning to slip down her cheeks. Not from pain, though her shoulder was on fire, but from the overwhelming relief of being alive, of being safe in Demon's arms, of knowing that someone had thought she was worth saving. "Thank you," she whispered, her lips brushing against his throat as she spoke. He stopped walking for a moment, his grip on her tightening. "Don't thank me," he said roughly. "Thank me for keeping you safe in the first place. Thank me for finding a way to protect you without putting you in danger. You couldn't have known. I should have known." His voice was full of self-recrimination. "I should have seen what Marcus was planning. Should have realized he'd use you to try to destroy me." They'd reached her chambers now, and Demon pushed through the door with his shoulder, carrying her directly to the bed. As he laid her down gently among the silk sheets, Serafina caught his hand in hers. "He orchestrated it, didn't he?" she asked quietly. "The attack. He planned it all." Demon's expression went deadly cold. "I believe so. And when I have proof, there will be consequences." Morrigan bustled into the room with her supplies, immediately beginning to fuss over Serafina's wounds. But even as the healer worked, Serafina kept her eyes on Demon, watching him pace the room like a caged predator. The political implications of tonight would be enormous. Marcus's cowardice had been witnessed by dozens of pack members, while Demon's heroism had been equally visible. The rumors about their relationship would spread like wildfire, and the pressure for Demon to either claim her or cast her aside would become overwhelming. But for now, all that mattered was that she was alive, that her daughters were safe upstairs in the nursery, that the man she loved had risked everything to save her, and that tomorrow would bring whatever challenges it would bring. Tonight, she was simply grateful to be breathing. Chapter 5. Dawn broke gray and cold over Castle Blackthorn, casting long shadows through the windows of Serafina's chambers. She lay propped against silk pillows, her shoulder wrapped in clean bandages that already showed spots of seeping blood. The healing potions had dulled the worst of the pain, but nothing could ease the ache in her heart as she watched Demon pace the room like a caged wolf. He hadn't left her side since carrying her from the battlefield 12 hours ago. His ceremonial robes had been replaced by simple black clothing, but he still wore the Alpha King's crown, a reminder of the impossible position they found themselves in. Every few minutes, he would stop his restless movement to check on her, his silver eyes dark with barely controlled rage. "You should rest," she said softly, though they both knew sleep was impossible. The events of the previous night hung between them like a blade, sharp with unspoken truths and deadly consequences. "I can't." His voice was hoarse from exhaustion and fury. "Not until I deal with Marcus." A soft knock interrupted them, and Captain Thorne, head of Demon's personal guard, entered with a grim expression. Behind him came two of his most trusted men, their faces reflecting the same dark mood that had settled over the entire castle. "Your Majesty," Thorne said, bowing briefly. "Beta Marcus has arrived for the audience you requested. He's waiting in the throne room with his legal counsel and 3 witnesses." Demon's jaw clenched. Of course Marcus had brought an entourage. He was playing this like a political chess match, positioning himself as the wronged party, while Demon looked like a king letting personal feelings cloud his judgment. "And the investigation into the rogue attack?" Demon asked. "Ongoing, but we've found evidence of communication between someone in our pack and the rogue leader. Messages arranging the timing and location of the attack." Thorne's expression darkened. Whoever planned this knew exactly when and where the ceremony would take place. Serafina felt sick. The confirmation of what they'd all suspected made everything worse. Marcus had orchestrated mass murder to eliminate her and weaken Demon's position. How many pack members had died because of her? How many families would never be whole again? "I should come with you," she said, trying to sit up straighter despite the pain shooting through her shoulder. "Absolutely not." Demon's tone brooked no argument. "You're injured, and I won't have you subjected to his manipulations while you're vulnerable. But I'm the reason for all of this. If I don't face him..." "You're not responsible for his actions," Demon cut her off fiercely. "Marcus made his choices. Now he'll face the consequences." But even as he spoke, Serafina could see the doubt in his eyes. The political reality was harsh. Challenging Marcus without ironclad proof would look like personal vendetta, not royal justice. And Marcus was too clever to leave evidence that could damn him completely. Demon moved to her bedside, his hand gentle as it cupped her cheek. "Stay here. Rest. Let me handle this." She wanted to argue, wanted to insist on standing by his side and facing whatever came together. But the exhaustion weighing her down was overwhelming, and her daughters needed her to heal quickly. So she nodded, even as every instinct screamed that letting him face Marcus alone was a mistake. "Be careful," she whispered. "He's more dangerous than you realize." Something flickered in Demon's eyes, a question, perhaps, or a shadow of suspicion. But he only nodded and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead before striding from the room, Captain Thorne and his guards falling into step behind him. The throne room of Castle Blackthorn was designed to intimidate. Soaring stone arches supported a vaulted ceiling painted with scenes of legendary hunts, while tall windows cast dramatic shafts of light across the polished marble floor. The Alpha King's throne sat on a raised dais, carved from a single piece of black granite and inlaid with silver wolves that seemed to watch with knowing eyes. Demon took his seat with controlled grace, the crown catching the morning light as he settled into position. Below him, Marcus waited with his carefully selected audience, his legal counsel, 2 pack elders who had always supported traditional values, and one of the visiting alphas from the previous night's ceremony. Marcus had chosen his allies well. All 3 were conservatives who would view Demon's protection of another man's mate as weakness, possibly even madness. They stood with expressions of concerned duty, as if they were reluctantly participating in an intervention for their beloved but misguided king. Beta Marcus. Demon's voice carried the weight of absolute authority, echoing off the stone walls. You requested this audience. Speak. Marcus stepped forward with just the right amount of reluctant deference, his pale eyes downcast as if the very act of challenging his king pained him. Your Majesty, it grieves me to stand before you under such circumstances. But recent events have forced me to speak out of concern for our pack's well-being. Continue. The rogue attack last night was a tragedy that cost us good lives and valuable resources. But what concerns me more is how it exposed certain vulnerabilities in our leadership. The words were chosen carefully, implying criticism without stating it directly. Demon's fingers tightened on the arms of his throne, but his expression remained impassive. Explain. Marcus lifted his head, meeting Demon's gaze with practiced sincerity. Your Majesty, your protection of my mate has become a source of gossip and speculation throughout the pack. Last night, instead of directing our defenses or ensuring the safety of visiting dignitaries, you focused entirely on rescuing one individual. Are you suggesting I should have left an innocent woman to die? I'm suggesting that your personal feelings are compromising your ability to lead effectively. Marcus's voice carried just the right note of pained honesty. Your obsession with Seraphina has become common knowledge, Your Majesty. The other alphas whisper that you've lost your objectivity, that you're no longer capable of making decisions based on the greater good. The visiting alpha, a grizzled man named Fenris who ruled one of the northern territories, stepped forward. With respect, Your Majesty, Beta Marcus speaks truly. The rumors about your attachment to his mate have reached our territories. Some question whether a king who cannot control his base desires can be trusted to control a kingdom. It was exactly what Demon had feared. The political poison was spreading, undermining his authority and threatening the stability of everything he'd built. And the worst part was that Marcus was right. Demon had compromised his effectiveness as a leader the moment he'd decided to protect Seraphina. My decisions regarding the protection of pack members are not subject to debate, Demon said coldly. If you question my judgment, you're welcome to challenge it through proper channels. Which brings me to my proposal, Marcus said smoothly. Return Seraphina to my custody where she belongs, and this unfortunate situation can be resolved. Her daughters will remain under royal protection as decreed, but she will resume her proper place as my bonded mate. The pack's concerns will be satisfied, and your reputation can begin to recover. The reasonable tone made Demon's wolf snarl with rage. Marcus was positioning himself as the magnanimous party, willing to forgive his king's momentary weakness and take back his errant mate. It was a masterful political maneuver that would be difficult to refuse without looking petty and obsessed. And if I decline this generous offer? Marcus's expression grew pained. Then I fear the pack elders will have no choice but to question your fitness to rule. A king who cannot master his own desires, who puts personal wants above pack welfare. He spread his hands helplessly. Such concerns would require formal investigation. The threat was clear. Challenge Marcus and face a vote of no confidence from the pack leaders. It would mean civil war, with thousands of lives hanging in the balance. And all because Demon couldn't bear to let go of a woman who was legally bound to another man. You paint me as a tyrant stealing another man's wife, Demon observed. Yet I've seen no evidence that Seraphina wishes to return to you. Indeed, her behavior suggests quite the opposite. My mate is confused and traumatized by recent events, Marcus replied with practiced patience. She needs time to remember her duties and obligations. Under proper guidance, she'll return to her rightful mindset. The casual way he spoke of forcing Seraphina's compliance made Demon's blood boil. But before he could respond, the throne room doors burst open with enough force to send them crashing against the stone walls. Seraphina stood in the doorway, swaying slightly but radiating desperate determination. She dressed hastily in a simple blue gown, her bandaged shoulder causing one side to hang awkwardly. Her auburn hair fell loose around her shoulders, and her green eyes blazed with a fire that made everyone in the room take notice. "Stop!" she said, her voice carrying clearly despite her obvious exhaustion. All of you, just stop. Serafina. Demon rose from his throne, alarm clear in his voice. You should be resting. I should be here. She cut him off, walking forward on unsteady legs. Because this entire conversation is based on a lie that I can no longer allow to continue. Marcus's face went white. Serafina, you're not well. You should return to your chambers before you say something you'll regret. She laughed bitterly, the sound echoing off the stone walls. Regret? The only thing I regret is staying silent for so long. She turned to face Demon, her eyes bright with unshed tears. You want to know the truth about my bonding to Marcus? About why I can never seem to play the part of a grateful mate. Serafina, don't. Marcus started forward, but Captain Thorne stepped into his path, hand on his sword hilt. Because there was no bonding, she continued, her voice gaining strength. There was no ceremony, no willing acceptance, no legal mate bond at all. There was only a purchase agreement and a bill of sale. The words hit the throne room like a physical blow. Even the pack elders stepped back, their faces reflecting shock and growing horror. What are you saying? Demon's voice was barely above a whisper. Serafina's hands trembled as she spoke, but her voice remained steady. My birth pack, the Mountain Ridge pack, was slaughtered by rogues 3 years ago. I was barely 15, hiding in the forest with my infant daughters when the killing began. When the slavers found me, I was half dead from cold and starvation. Marcus made another move toward her, but this time 2 more guards blocked his path. His carefully constructed facade was crumbling, replaced by desperate panic. Marcus bought me at a slave market in the borderlands, Serafina continued, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. Paid good coin for a young female with proven fertility. The bonding ceremony was him forcing me to sign documents I couldn't read while threatening to kill my babies if I refused. You're lying, Marcus snarled, all pretense of hurt innocence abandoned. She's making this up to escape her obligations. The scars on my back tell a different story, Serafina said quietly. The ones from the silver whips you used to train me. The burn marks from the brands you threatened to use if I ever tried to run. Morrigan has seen them all, catalogued them all. The throne room had gone deadly silent. Even the morning birds outside seemed to have stopped singing, as if the very stones of the castle were absorbing the horror of her revelation. Demon's face had gone white as carved marble, his silver eyes blazing with a fury that made the air itself seem to crackle. When he spoke, his voice was soft with the kind of rage that preceded violence. You bought her. Like livestock. Your Majesty, you have to understand. Marcus backed away as Demon rose from his throne, power radiating from him in waves. You tortured her. Threatened her children. Forced her into servitude through terror and violence. The contracts are legal. Everything I did was within pack law. Marcus's voice cracked with desperation. Pack law doesn't recognize slavery, Demon said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute judgment. Pack law doesn't protect monsters who prey on orphaned girls and helpless infants. He descended the steps of the dais with predatory grace, and Marcus scrambled backward until he hit the wall. The visiting dignitaries and pack elders watched in stunned silence as their alpha king stalked his prey. The bonding documents are void, Demon declared, his voice echoing with royal authority. The property contracts are illegal and unenforceable. Serafina and her daughters are hereby freed from all claims and obligations. It should have been over. Justice served, truth revealed, and the innocent protected. But Marcus Ravenclaw had not survived as long as he had by accepting defeat gracefully. His hand went to the communication device at his belt, activating it with a sharp click. Now, he said into the device, his voice carrying clearly in the silent throne room. Demon's blood turned to ice as he recognized the implication. What did you do? Marcus straightened, a terrible smile spreading across his pale features. Insurance, Your Majesty. My men have standing orders in case of difficulties. Right now, they're holding one of Serafina's daughters. Little Luna, I believe, the weak one who barely survived birth. Serafina's scream of anguish echoed off the stone walls as her legs gave out beneath her. Only Captain Thorne's quick reflexes prevented her from crashing to the marble floor. You monster, Demon snarled, his form beginning to shimmer as his wolf pressed for release. If you've hurt her. She's perfectly safe, Marcus said with mock sincerity. For now. But her continued health depends entirely on Serafina's cooperation. His pale eyes fixed on her tear-streaked face. Come with me willingly, my dear wife. Resume your proper place by my side, and little Luna will grow up healthy and whole. Refuse. He shrugged eloquently. The political chess match had become a hostage situation. All of Marcus's careful maneuvering had led to this moment, using an innocent child as leverage to force compliance and escape justice. Serafina struggled to her feet, Captain Thorne's hands steady on her arms. Her face was a mask of maternal desperation and terrible resolve. "Let me go," she said quietly. "Serafina, no." Demon started toward her, but she held up a trembling hand to stop him. "He has my daughter," she said, her voice breaking. "My baby girl. I won't let him hurt her because of my choices." "We'll get her back," Demon promised fiercely. "We'll find her, Anne. By the time your guards locate her, she'll be dead." Marcus's voice was filled with vicious satisfaction. "My men have orders to kill her at the first sign of pursuit. The only way she survives is if Serafina comes with me now, of her own free will." It was the cruelest choice imaginable. Freedom at the cost of her child's life, or continued slavery to protect the innocent. For a mother, there was no choice at all. "I'll come," Serafina said, her voice hollow with defeat. "Just please don't hurt her. She's just a baby." "Of course not," Marcus said smoothly, though his eyes glittered with malice. "I'm not a monster, despite what you've told our king. Luna will be returned unharmed once we're safely away from the castle." Lies. They all knew they were lies. Once Marcus had Serafina back in his control, he would have no reason to keep his promises. The child was a liability, a witness to his crimes. She would disappear, and Serafina would be told she died of some childhood illness. But Serafina was a mother, and mothers would sacrifice anything for their children. Even their lives. Even their souls. "No," Demon said suddenly, his voice carrying absolute authority. "I won't allow it." "You have no choice," Marcus replied with a triumphant smile. "Unless you're willing to let an innocent child die for your obsession." The words hung in the air like a blade, cutting through every argument and legal technicality. This wasn't about pack law or royal prerogative anymore. This was about a monster holding a baby hostage, and a mother willing to damn herself to save her child. Serafina took a shaky step toward Marcus, then another. Each movement was agony, not from her physical wounds, but from the knowledge that she was walking back into hell to protect her daughter. "I'm ready," she said, her voice barely audible. But as she reached Marcus's side, as his triumphant hand closed around her wrist like a shackle, the throne room doors burst open once again. And everything changed. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like and share this video to be the first to get notified when the part 2 of this story drops.